The opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Return the Jewels. Also, there's explicit language. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 17. We're in season 2, episode 3, I guess, although it's episode 17. Um, so I recorded this interview like a month ago, although I'm recording this on the 14th of January currently, and this episode will release on the 20th, which is, well, I guess, which is today because you're watching it. Also, the inauguration day. And so I felt that my conversation with this guest would be very appropriate for right now, and you'll see why. So I asked Ramon Rivas the second, to come on. Ramon is a friend, but don't let that take away from the fact that he's a globally recognized professional stand-up comedian, writer, actor, and cannabis shaman. Uh, so he travels all over, and before quarantine he was like tri-coastal, well, not coastal, one of them's landlocked, but he did a lot of road work, traveling. I would always run into him in New York. He would do spots on all the biggest shows while he's here, and then go back to Cleveland, work on his stuff, go out to LA. He's been all over, but he really one big thing about him is, even though he's in all these different scenes, he helped build the Cleveland comedy community scene, and he's actively working to build it and empower people within that comedy scene uh, that don't really have all the connections in New York and LA or whatever. And because he does, and but he is taking that focus inward locally, and especially with quarantine, and it's really, really admirable. And so that's why, after watching this interview, you really should check him out. um, Things you can check out of his. He was okay. Let me read this list. He was a Comedy Central comic to watch in 2015. He had a part on Broad City, uh, HBO's Crashing, Netflix Cooking on High. He's got a podcast called Pre Baked. Um, the thing about Ramon, and he's got a couple of specials out. They are Sorry, I paused for a second just so I can get this right. So he's got an album out, or that you can download on iTunes or audio platforms, called Self High Five, and we talked about it in the episode. You can get it on Tidal, Tidal, which actually provides more revenue to the artists, uh, per capita, or I guess depending on how it works. He talks about the specifics in the episode. But the album is called Self High Five or Stick to Comedy, and also the debut album called Revisited. You can check out all of this stuff on his website, blazerramon.com. That's BLAZERRAMON.com, and it's right here. But basically, look him up. You'll see a bunch of his clips on YouTube and really just wherever you get things. Definitely make sure you download the album. You got Apple Music, if you got Tidal, anything. Um, and because one big thing we talked about is self promotion and the different mechanisms, how people are adapting now in the pandemic, and the way how the industry, whatever industries, are going to emerge after this. So but you'll get a sense of all of this in the interview. So we got into a lot of heavy topics, but so Ramon dropped a lot of practical and technical information that can be of use to anyone listening. Um, we talked about body dysmorphia, angliciz- anglicization, anglicization and palatability of names and heritage, self-policing of tone and identity, the metaphorical fight or flight, and just a bunch of different entrepreneurial things Ramon has been getting into. But really, I've been recording this intro too long. The interview itself is pretty long, but it's definitely worth the watch and probably a rewatch. But check it out, Ramon Rivas.
Hey everyone. So today we have with us Ramon Rivas the second. Did I say it right?
That is correct. I think it's Rivas, like Beavis, but with an R. But I don't. Some people say
Well,
Rivas. Some people say Rivers. A lot of pizza places will just say Rivers.
they'll just add an R. Now, is that like the British add an R after an A and everything, or they just add an R?
I don't know what it is about a lot of like. I guess it's mostly white people who just they see a very simple name, but they add consonants or they try too hard to get through the phonetics of it. I'm usually respectful of the effort at least. But as long as you're close, it don't matter.
Probably had a friend in the school who was like, "You actually pronounce his name Yivas." No,
Mm-hmm.
maybe probably never mind. No, the reason I ask is I've been asking this on every episode, like up top, because there's this thing that we've been thinking about on here about like how maybe minorities or whatever, or first generation, or people that feel marginalized, they kind of anglicize their last names as to be palatable, but it's kind of like inherent. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
I say love Agrawal, and I've always been saying it, and I continue to say it, when in reality, you know, to anybody in the extended family, it's Agrawal, right?
Mm.
But Agrawal is phonetically how it
How it
looks.
looks.
Right. So I always ask because I want to put that out there, and also it always leads to some sort of conversation about how your name gets messed up or how people have different intentions with saying your name,
Yeah.
and it's like
Well, like my dad's family's from Puerto Rico, which is they're Americans, but they're not
right.
counted. Um, so I think there's a village in Puerto Rico named Rivas. Like I don't know if that's where it like comes from all the way back, but like that's what our last name is. My mom's Mexican and her side of the family is Villa or Villa, just whatever that
Right.
means. Um, and so growing up, I have dual cultural and then American culture triple, and then American culture also has like white and black within it. So there's all these like different ripples, but like definitely like my grandmother, who again was American, but she's from Puerto Rico. They moved from Puerto Rico to Lorain, Ohio, because the steel plant and the shipyards and all that would go recruit in other countries.
Okay.
So they went down to Puerto Rico and like, hey, y'all want to come work at this steel plant for $5 a week? And they're all sitting there making a quarter a day, like, mm-hmm.
Insourcing before
So,
outsourcing.
yup. And also like bring them in to kind of suppress American wages.
Oh, absolutely.
You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? So Lorain, the city I live in now, at a certain point in history, it's known as the international city. It's very New Yorkish as far as like the cultural balance. And you could just raise a family, work at these plant jobs, not have any aspirations. They're all union jobs, work till you retire and own a house, own a car, have a little more for your kids than you did. And so my uh, grandparents came here and they had 17 kids total
Yeah.
in the whole span. So they had a couple in Puerto Rico before they moved up here initially. Then they had the middle batch. Then they moved back to Puerto Rico, had another, and then they moved back. So moving like that with that many kids is mind-boggling, especially without like equity.
Yeah. Wow. Pure. Well, I mean, not quite nomadic, but nomadic.
Somewhat, and I think the reason they moved from Puerto Rico to Lorraine for the steel plant, And then my grandpa wanted to move back because I think his brother, from what I've been told, his brother was like elected mayor of Puerto Rico. So he was like, "Well, I'm about to go down here and stunt." And so he moved.
I would
He
do it too.
moved
I would
back.
do it too. Yeah.
And then my grandma didn't like it, so she wanted to move back. So it's this real tug and pull with like, she never learned English ever.
Wow.
And so all her kids are bilingual because they had to exist in both worlds. They had to be able to communicate with the family at home and then at school, at work, all these other places.
Right.
And I don't think this is a weird phrase, but I don't think many of them clicked educationally. Like, not like they all kind of felt like outcasts at school, or my dad was like smart but didn't apply himself. Things like, like just
it's not a question of intelligence.
Didn't fully assimilate.
Right.
So you feel on the outskirts. And then my generation, none of us speak Spanish. Maybe like one or two of us do.
Like at
but
all?
Of all those 17 who all are bilingual, maybe 10 kids total are bilingual. But all of us learned how to communicate with our grandmother, but not through language.
So, okay. So within our categories, I guess you would say you're technically first generation, but the fact that it's all
I think my dad's first generation. Well, technically my grandma's first generation because she's Puerto Rican American.
Right.
And then my mom is second generation, so her dad was first generation. So I'm third generation Mexican, and then second generation Puerto Rican, or third, depending how you count the initial.
Well, okay. I mean, so the reason I guess I kind of try to bring it up is, so we talk to like first generation people, or people whose parents, sometimes on this podcast we talk to people whose parents immigrated, but in your case it's all America, nonetheless, right? So the culture shift is different. The culture shift is there, but it's different. So that's what I wondered, because the point I was thinking about was like, okay, with the language and not necessarily speaking Spanish in your generation. And then, I was having this conversation on a previous episode about how, like, the being jaded is a privilege afforded a second generation and beyond. Whereas
I mean, the older generations may have felt jaded but had no language to describe the feeling.
Okay, can you elaborate?
So how are you going to be how are you going to be jaded when your parents don't, like, I don't know, like, I remember my dad told me, like, he would ask his dad for, like, can I get $1 for the ice cream truck? He'd pull out a big wad of money and be like, no, don't got any. And put it in his pocket, and then would later just go give money to random neighborhood kids. So that's a weird, like, my dad could not, as a kid, be like, hey, that's fucked. That, like, you're making me jaded towards my father. He didn't have that ability to even identify that as a feeling. It's just something he offhand told me in a recollection, and I'm like, oh yeah, masculinity was real different back then. But so I probably would not be able to have, like, even if we spoke the same language, I wouldn't be able to have like a fluid conversation with my grandfather, because just like as progressive or liberal as I am, he's from this very hyper masculine Hispanic machismo space. He ain't gonna understand like no non-binary or he's not gonna understand all these deep feeling shits that we kind of take for granted because we're so far in this, like.
So maybe it's not jaded that is the privilege of second generation and beyond, but it's having a wider space to explore those emotions, or maybe not necessarily being captured or susceptible to so much masculinity that's toxic and having the space to explore. Toxic,
Yeah.
like maybe if you're first generation or even immigrant generation, you can even now possibly have these conversations about toxic masculinity without having to confront that part of you that needs to adapt in this
Mhm.
environment that runs on toxic masculinity, just like Duncan. No, sorry, that's bad.
Yeah.
But so okay, maybe it's not being jaded, but I was thinking like being jaded more so in the sense of like if you're the immigrant generation and you come here, you have the contextual experiences of your past life in whatever country you're coming from or whatever
To
treatment
lean
you're
on.
coming from. Right, to lean on and to contextualize how you're treated here. So either all of your interactions in this new country are blessings or transgressions, depending on whatever privilege you came from and how you push it onto your to the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
I'm talking about all this generation stuff because I remember like a few months ago we had a conversation and you were talking about how you were learning these new theories and exploring these new theories about how generational trauma is like coded into DNA and it expresses itself. And first I was just kind of hoping you could like talk on that for a second.
Yeah, there's a couple books. I haven't gotten through the second one, but the first one is It Didn't Start With You. And I'll talk about that one. But the second one is The Body Keeps the Score, and that goes like real in depth. Um, it didn't start with you. The research is, and they're still studying it in humans because our generations are so long, it's harder to
Right.
observe. But with like lab mice, what they'll do is they'll light like a vanilla candle, and then they'll take a electric thing and shock these mice every time they light the candle. So they'll light a vanilla candle, they'll shock these mice. Then those mice will have kids and they won't do anything to them. And then the next those
Um,
kids, they'll just light the vanilla candle and they'll all cower. Now, none of them have ever been shocked themselves,
and none of them
but
is
it's
vanilla.
this is a fear. It's a fear. It's embedded. They used to call it junk DNA. Like they're like these are the DNA that show what you look like and how did all this. This other stuff is just kind of junk. But that's where all this like fight or flight type of stuff gets
Wow.
programmed in. And so that's the specific like simplest way to explain it, but people are very much the same way. So the
Kind of
examples,
like how we see more shades of green because predators would hide in the grass when we're nomadic.
yeah. And so, you know, in nature you adapt for bodily safety, but humans also operate on this like social and mental space too. So you have like physical fight or flight, and then you have mental fight or flight, and then you have emotional fight or flight
Mm.
because of how complex our systems are.
Right. So physical fight or flight is the same metaphor that we use for everything. But then when you think about mental flight or fight, that's probably fight or flight is probably how you process your well, no, I guess it's emotional fight or flight, but mental fight or flight would be how
Like mental fight or flight would be if
decision
you
making.
work like I'll say it this. My both my parent, like my mom specifically, would always work in nonprofits, and she'd always be overqualified but undereducated, right? And so
Wow.
that would run her into is she would be in a subordinate position to people she knew had more experience doing the thing, whether that was big brothers, big sisters, or within the foster care system. She was in a position to know that, like specifically in foster care, that the clients weren't being advocated for properly by this uh, what are they called?
Social
Foster
workers.
care agent, social worker. So the
Okay.
social worker wasn't properly advocating for the clients. My
Right.
mom knows this, but can't, like when she would say something, she would get put back in her place. And so you run into that enough, you just don't even bring it up. That's what I mean. Like you've the mental microaggressions or whatever you want to call them that you've had to deal with, having your intelligence disqualified or having your experiences disqualified or questioned, you just give up. And you're not even gonna say it. So I don't know. That's a abstract. I'm getting higher as this conversation goes on. So Mike,
it's great. I mean, we're talking about pretty heady stuff. Do you think that manifests then? So something like that, you know, the accumulation, the aggregation of different microaggressions, which leads to you're apprehensive about certain actions or calling things out. Do you think that manifests then in your future generation? Like if all this happened to your mom, do you think that manifests in you and your behavior and possibly being apprehensive about?
I mean, somewhat in the sense of like, I've seen how my parents are and they work very hard to be exactly where they are. Right. Yeah. And so I've done comedy the same way in that I've done kind of a lot of things, but I've worked very hard to be exactly where I am, kind of on the same plane as my parents. But the tendency of them to be stuck in the system that kind of suppresses them. I have to navigate a system that suppresses or doesn't give me proper consideration or has biases against me, but I figure out how to operate on the margins. So like the clubs in Cleveland wouldn't work me my first few years because I wasn't funny. So I ran a bunch of my own shows so I could and that's because I saw my parents hustle. My mom does massage and energy work on the side. My dad does like contracting and electrician work. Like they've all, and around the holidays, we sell coquito, which is like this Latino eggnog. So it's just always hustling. You can always be doing something to make a little bit, whether that little bit is money or experience. So I do have that baked in from how my parents are, but I struggle to break past that to that sphere where I'm like, oh, I've done A, B, and C. I guess I should expect more rather than having to like patch it all together.
Right. I'm in survival mode. I don't know if I'm equipped for thriving mode because I can't expect thriving mode. Maybe because I can't comprehend thriving mode. Although knowing you and I know the community you're in and who you're around, you see people thriving and people surviving and people not surviving. And so you can see what thriving looks like, but surviving is enough.
Yeah, and survival is kind of baked into the DNA. I feel like in most of us, like we'll figure it out. But to get out of that, it takes a lot of work. Yeah. Because you have to raise your wants and needs when you've maybe spent a lifetime keeping them low so you don't get let down, or you don't have to feel, you know, if I have all my shit up here and the world treats me like I'm down here, I'm gonna be sad or I'm gonna be mad. You know what I'm saying? So if I keep it down here and accept when it's up here, but like no, it's gonna be down here, I'm not.
Yeah. You know. No, I mean, even like a couple episodes ago, we had Chef Harold on. You remember Chef Harold from? He was talking about. He was like, I got my minimum number, bro. I got however much I need for, you know, whatever frequent period of time, a month, a day, whatever, however much I need. And he's like, everything on top of that is just cherries. And, you know, it might sound nonchalant and like not aggressive, but I feel like that mindset opens, like you look at Chef Harold, or you look at you, right? You're constantly doing something new. I'm building my brand or a brand. I'm able to dissect what this large organization is doing, break it down into tiny elements, see how I can emulate each element on my own with the lowest level production because I can't afford anything higher than that. I can barely afford the lowest level production. So you know what? I'm going to cheat the lowest level production with whatever creative tips and tricks I can think of. And boom, now I got a breakthrough because the thing that I thought of to cheat the low level of production actually turned out to be a bold artistic choice that people are vibing with. And it's like, how many times does that kind of thing happen to you in like so your thing is comedy, right? I do like photos and images or whatever. A lot of motivations for different things I do for images is literally based off of my limitations, right? If I can't get a good image, I'll just blow the color out and be like, this is a stylistic choice because this is the clearest I can get something, or maybe this doesn't need to be clear. It just depends on the narrative I tack onto it.
Yeah.
Right. And so how many times in your like joke writing or even like we're gonna get into this, but I know you're doing like a lot of self promotion and you're shifting hard into like personal production, content creation and stuff, just because of the pandemic not being able to go on stage much. But how much of your content creation and everything is driven by that? By just I need, I can cheat the things that it takes all these people, all these mad resources, and all these different people to do. And I'm gonna do it as a one person. And you know what? This is my artistic choice. Every single decision or all my discretion is based off of this lens of DIY.
Well, my like most of my artistic um creativity as far as like environment stems from I'm not going to wait. I'll just figure this out. And the one thing I do know, like I don't have a lot, but like I know how to set a vibe. So like I've so like over the years, I know how to set the seats. Like now you can't sit nobody close, but I know how to set the seats like spacing wise, you can fit the max amount of people and everyone's just the energy's there. I got the music beforehand that like you when you're just there, you're like, oh, there's a vibe, but it's like each track is on there for a specific thing. Um and then like if those things are done right, the audience is gonna have a good time. And then if the audience is ready to have a good time, the comics are about to smash. So all that came from me literally being like, okay, I can't go in there. So I'm not the club. I'm not this business that has money to promote that all I got is like word of mouth and vibe and aesthetic. And what that all exists, whether the place is physical or not. And what I mean by that is like the creek in the cave
Yeah.
was a physical space,
Right.
but whatever Rebecca does has that vibe and that sense of community to it.
Yeah.
And so like that, and that can exist in a space, but it's not tied to it. It's not tethered to it.
Right.
And so I guess part one of the artistry is knowing that like this shit can come from wherever. It doesn't like just because we ain't in the club doesn't mean this ain't gonna be funny or it's not gonna be valuable. Even if the show is free, I'm establishing social value with
Right. It's like how Bernie Sanders in like 2015 or whatever his first rally was like with the broken banner, and it was like in a tiny thing with that was like at half capacity, like 20 people showed up, and it's like it showed like the from then to now anything can start from anywhere. It just has to catch on and go
it's
viral.
just
It can go viral in real life or it can go viral
and
digitally.
and virality like three people is a virus. Sometimes you know what I'm saying. Like when you start
We
when you
know a
just
lot more
start with
about
something.
viruses now.
Yeah, but like like when I started doing the show at the park down the street from
Right.
me, the first week there was like 8 people, and then the second week there was like maybe like 15, and then by the third and fourth week it was like 60, 70 people. I'm like, oh shit, I didn't have like I don't got no like it's just people were like, oh, this is interesting, and would just come through. There were people who came every week I did it. And they're just like, thank you. I had someone send me a message that said it felt like we went to Cleveland for a night of entertainment and we just was right here, which is cool to be able to capture that professional aesthetic and like, oh, I went to an event
Yeah.
in what is essentially a fucking parking lot or a park. Like that is such an intangible.
You're so used to taking that magic for granted that now you can.
It's hard to even quantify that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I know what I do is valuable, but I don't know how to value it. So like I ran a comedy festival for like 8 years, and the last 2 years of it was at a comedy club.
Right.
And the first year, everyone made money. Right. So the second year, the business changed a little bit, but the only difference logistically is it was the year I was in Scotland for the Fringe Festival.
Right.
So normally the month before the festival, I'm in Cleveland hanging up flyers, politicking, kissing babies, just doing the thing.
Right.
And I'm in Edinburgh doing that at this festival where there's thousands of people doing that in the city. That like when I landed over there, I felt I'd been in LA for so long, I felt like I was in Cleveland because the weather's very like it'll be nice and then shitty and then nice and then rainy and then sunny. I'm like, oh yeah, this is Cleveland. Like it's just the people, it was a working class collar type of people. So I'm like, okay, like I just felt all right. I didn't feel out of place, if that makes sense. Because I always feel out of place. So I didn't feel like
familiar.
Yes. And so I'm doing this thing that I'm comfortable doing in this city that feels familiar, but while all these people are doing it, right? And so it's like screaming into a fucking tornado.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a crash course in learning all these different marketing things because you see
right?
You're literally in a render farm of different people's different strategies.
So that month I do my hour 20. I'm supposed to do it 25 times. I wind up doing it 22 because a couple shows got canceled because no people came. I did shows for as little as 2 people, and I did like a couple shows to like a dozen or more, but like most were like in between that span.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean with the virality is just a couple people. Like I went over there and like I got respect from like some old head English UK comics who were like, I fuck with what you're doing. My reviews were all like, this just seems like one of them said it felt like a one-sided therapy session. Because I went over there. I went over there and was using it as like when Rocky goes to the mountains and is training, lifting all shit. That's how I treated Edinburgh. I went over there, I did my hour 22 times. I think I did 56 sets total. So I did a bunch of other shows. I did some like talking head type shows. Like I was the gym.
Training in panel mode, training in stand-up mode, training in marketing mode.
Now, my roommate, Alex Edelman, who's like won awards over there, he had like his shows were sold out. His shit was super well reviewed. He just knows he did like 70 some sets. He had the flu like 2 of the weeks. So he was sick doing all these stuff. And he treated it like the fight. So he did all his training before.
Okay. Yeah.
So, but we're using it for different things. Because I'm not like, if I were, I have a Comedy Central special, I have an HBO Latino special, I've been on a couple of things. If I were able to headline clubs, doing my hour 22 times wouldn't have been a big deal. But that's more than I've been able to run my hour for a year and a half. Almost probably like 2 years before that, I did my hour 22 times in 2 years versus like being able to do it in 1 month.
Yeah.
So
intensive training.
And while I was over there, I was just using it like an accordion, like talking through stuff. So to go back to your artistry question,
you get to see Alex go through the fight so that you, with the way you filter things and lens things and are looking to always adapt, you get to see him go through the fight so that next time you do it better.
Yeah, like now I know for the free Fringe where you do a free show and then you pass the bucket at the end and people pay what they want versus I had my tickets for my show were £10. So do I want to pay £10 to see this dude I've never heard of, or do I want to go see 2 free Fringe shows and toss $5 in the bucket? That's the decision people are making at this festival
Right.
where city goes from 500,000 people to 1.5 million. So you have an infinite number of potential audience members, and it's like knowing how to do the shows that are popular so they'll come check you out, how to get the reviewers to come to your show and do well
Yeah.
with your show. You know, they were like, it feels raw because I was working shit out.
How long ago was Fringe when you went?
I went in 2018.
2018. So 2 years ago. Good timing for 2020 for your pivot, because I know that when we all went into quarantine and everything, you could see like on social media how different people are moving, what they're complaining about, whatever. And you just touched on it. You said your park show. What you did was, so you were able to take. Well, I'll let you talk about it, but you started a park show in Lorraine just as a way to keep yourself from being rusty, to platform people around you, maybe, but just to kind of have structure.
Have something, because like, all my gigs I had were getting canceled, and then the clubs that were reopening still weren't responding to my emails. So it's like, all right, if these clubs that give me validation don't exist, and these DIY spaces, these bar and like theater places I would go and do shows at in smaller places, either don't reopen or struggle to reopen, how am I going to still be valid? Or how can I still be valid as an artist in this context?
Coupled, of course, with the generational innate sense of like insecurity already being,
it's like, oh, I'm used to this.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like Lorraine, like the steel plant, the shipyard, and the auto industry, all like the shipyard closed in the 70s. The auto plants closed in the late 90s, early 2000s, and the steel yard closed in like all of them started cratering when NAFTA got passed, like looking back retroactively. But so economically, like this just bottomed out, or like it feels rural even though it's still a city.
Yeah.
And I've seen what if these places, like everyone's like the economy, what if these places don't open back up? I'm like, well, we just won't get donuts from Bill's Bakery anymore. Like I'm just so used to, there's a whole mall down the street. There's one thing in the food court, and there's maybe 2 kiosks. Like there's a dead mall, all the Sears, Dillard's, Macy's, all that shit is closing out of business. I have to drive past that to get on the highway to go anywhere.
You are a true critic of free market capitalism because you can understand free market capitalism.
Because I've seen it. I've seen the steel plant like open back up, and then they borrowed from the union like twice and then closed. So they just pilfered the retirement funds of all these people. So it's like, it's like, all right, it just is what it is. And so that breeds a weird like distrust of big business.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
I wouldn't say weird, but yeah.
Yeah, like, yeah. And so it makes you, I don't know,
hesitant.
Yeah, or just like, or just I've always felt that like everyone in charge of everything is the worst. That's how I've always just felt.
And especially people that want to be in charge of everything.
Yes. And then especially when you navigate these clubs, and like some clubs know what they're doing, some clubs don't. So, and like seeing and feeling the difference between the two, and then being like, okay, the difference is arbitrary. Like I'm the same in both scenarios. So like how to present yourself in each scenario becomes this whole battle.
Yeah, I mean, and I think like you starting your own park show, I saw the way you did it, right? It seems like, okay, you must have broken down how shows are running. You broke down
because I've been running shows since 2010.
So you know
And
what you need in terms of distancing and safety. You adapt those guidelines to your existing knowledge, and you're able to do a park show, which to you seems like, oh, okay, whatever. I'm just setting up an event. We're doing it weekly. I'm on a schedule. You know, these are the moving parts. I got a handle on them. But to other people, it's like, yo, this guy started a thing. This is a community.
yeah, and it's like it's hard to have that dual perspective
Yeah.
of like, oh, I'm doing something cool, but also like this is a free show at the park. Like it's
Yeah.
not.
All right.
It
This
builds
takes 3 hours of work a week.
it elevates you up to this weird social position over other people who aren't doing the same thing, and it's something that anyone can do.
Yeah.
Which I feel like maybe photography winds up feeling the same way. Like
Yeah.
anyone could pick up a camera and fucking take a picture, but anyone could get up and say some dumb shit. Anyone could just run a show. But there's a difference between something that like, oh, this is just you just a bad photographer. This is a blown out shot versus like, oh shit, like the way you did the lighting. I don't know what the difference is.
Right. Well, okay. So I know, I'm sure you know about what this is, and I don't know if we talked about it before, but I feel like we did. But you know the Kruger-Dunning effect, and we've always related it to, or like I've always related it to other people in like the comedy community or production community or whatever. But or lawyers, the Kruger-Dunning effect. Okay, so it's like a parabola. So if you have low knowledge about something, like let's say you're doing your first ever comedy show and you get up there and you get a few laughs and you think you killed it, right? So you have a high confidence and low knowledge, right? So then you'll assume that, comedy's easy. Why are these people taking 10 years to even get good and get booked when I killed it on the first night? High confidence. As you do more, your knowledge increases, but you get knocked down and knocked down and knocked down. And then you get to like this place where at the bottom of the parabola where you have zero confidence, but you got a good middling knowledge because you understand what you don't know. And then as you start to learn the things you don't know, you don't go up like this in confidence. You start to like go back up in confidence. And then you understand that shit, it took me X amount of years to get to this point to do this thing. And my perspective was warped before, but now I have a good confidence in, I can start a park show. I'll be able to book it. I'll be able to get a few people at least to watch. I'll be able to cut content from it. I'll be able to, and you have the confidence of that. And then people that are on the other side of the parabola, the beginning side of the parabola, will see something you do, right? And if they can do the one thing that you can do, they can assume that they can do all of the things you do because they have this high confidence and low knowledge, and you understand it's the other way around. And so that's called like the Dunning-Kruger effect.
It's equal parts both. Like I remember when I first started running my comedy festival, I emailed the clubs and asked if they wanted to be involved. And like one of the clubs was straight up like, you're asking people to come do a shitty, because I got a comedy stage at an existing arts festival, and the arts festival was under a bridge. So I was asking the club to get comics to come and perform outside at a music shit, which is a shitty gig.
Right.
But from my position of like, I'm trying to do something, I'm like, why is this club being an asshole? Where from where I am now, I'm like, oh yeah, I was just very eager to. Now I still did. I did it without either of them. It was cool. Like the vibe was interesting. The Lucas brothers came. Al Jackson came. I think Michael Palisak was there that year. Lisa Traeger was there that year. Like, and this was like 2011.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Also, friends that are supporting you because you did create a vibe, and
because my creativity led me to like DIYing it in Cleveland, but then I would pop out to Chicago because I knew like I just got the advice that like you could do a bunch of shows out there. I had a job at a nonprofit for a summer where I got free room and board, so I just went to Chicago and lived for 3 months, and that's where I met Kenny, Clark, Will, Megan, Lisa.
2 black dudes in an open mic, right?
Just at open mics and shit, and then like would go to New York, and starting I think in 2000 2011 was the first time I went to New York, and then I'd go to Chicago a couple times a year, New York a couple times a year, and then I started doing the same thing in LA in 2014 because I couldn't afford to live in any of these places,
Right.
but like I could get a cheap flight and like crash and do some
So
shit.
this is what, yeah. So this is the thing I wanted to talk to you about. Kind of, is I wanted to share a concept with you, and I don't know if we talked about this before, about like the extended metaphor as a kind of a mechanism for coping or contextualizing your environment. And so, I used to have this extended metaphor of like living in a spaceship, like when I lived in like this basement in Brooklyn and didn't really have anybody. I didn't really talk to anybody. I had a remote job, and my only interaction was one form email during the week, and it was a one-sided thing and didn't even get responded to. So that was a long time, but I had this extended metaphor of, yo, I live in a spaceship. I crash landed in the most populous city on this planet, and now I'm whenever I go out, if I go to movies alone, go to wherever alone, I'm an astronaut exploring and people watching when you could people watch. And so it
And you
helped
did
to,
that as a survival mechanism for your
sure.
mind, so your mind's not like, I'm in this sad basement. I
I'm
don't have
in
any
fucking
friends.
New York in a
No one's
sad
talking to
basement in
me.
Brooklyn.
Like, it makes sense if I'm an alien. Don't know when I talk to no aliens.
Right.
Like,
And
aliens gotta keep it cool.
my
Like, it
work is
makes
remote, so I'm just sending reports back to the thing daily. Oh, self-enrichment, anything I'm doing? Well, I'm just prepping for this journey. I got to get my
your
spaceship.
survival.
Right.
Your brain did what it needed to do to survive.
Right. And so, that metaphor, right? Something like for you, your home base is Ohio, your mothership. Sure. And you take your little cruiser out bi-coastal to go visit and reconnaissance, right? I'm going to get all this production knowledge. I'm going to get the training for the stage knowledge, training and panels knowledge. Now I got these clips of myself on Comedy Central that I can traffic in for my own brand, potentially in this. And like,
And it was not with anything near that intentionality, but yeah,
right. But now, now with like clarity and seeing, and
in retrospect,
right,
like,
in
yeah,
retrospect.
okay, yeah.
But also, I mean, also that goes to not necessarily understanding your value. If you come from generational trauma that led to an extreme ability to adapt, and I'm gonna like play one of your clips. There's this bit where you talk about where it's like being poor is a superpower, just because your ability to adapt to things and be creative in your solutions. Just so all of that. Hold on, I lost my train of thought. Okay, being creative in your solutions and being able to self promote and all of that. Do you have your own extended metaphor or something that you want to share, maybe, or that you don't want to share, or whatever? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, I get what you mean by
right,
extended metaphor. Like I guess and I'll abstract that to be like that was your brain doing what it needed to do to keep you going.
sure,
So I can answer it in that context.
okay,
Like
yeah.
I just want to make enough money to pay my bills and not die. Like that's like baseline crushing it for me.
Yeah,
Like if I can like make enough money to pay my bills and not die, like I'm dope. If I'm doing that within what I love and want to do, and like think of that in the context of a photographer. If you're a photographer who can pay your bills and not die in New York, you're good. You're a good photographer. You know what I'm saying?
right. It doesn't
And
matter
so
here.
now I don't live in New York, but I'll survive in New York when I go.
Right.
Right. And I mean that like financially survive on like a budget, but then also like I don't feel like I'm behind the eight ball when I do a show with all these fucking beasts. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? If I get to do comedy at the Net and it's hot and fucking Sydney, everybody's just crushing it. I gotta go up after some monsters. Like I don't feel like some podunky dude from Ohio. when
But I
I
mean, you are
got
also validated in your own right. You hold court, and like all these people are your friends and your peers, and you're
Mhm.
able to, you
from
share
years
the
of
stage,
going there,
right,
yeah.
from years of doing this stuff. So it's like that. Like I wouldn't even think that would factor into, but of course it may. Like just if there's disparities in different people's platforms and resources, and if that
Mhm.
factors into you and your performance on stage, I wouldn't think so, but maybe.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes,
Yeah,
in the sense of like I'm talking about my experience as a big broke brown man in America.
yeah,
So the context of that is living in Ohio. Like there's on if you listen to my act and my albums, like you just get like, oh, this dude just like be smoking weed and doing comedy, but I'm talking about like a bunch of random ass shit
right,
around it. But it's all centered through my experiences. And
yeah,
it's not like I have like I'm not putting my comedic lens onto like what about golf or pop culture? Like I'm not, but I may talk about pop culture in its context to me.
yeah. Share a personal anecdote and then
So
relate it
like,
with your opinions.
yeah, so to give you a rough, like I was fortunate I got past at the cellar in 2019. And so I still feel very like that shit blows my mind. As like, you know what I'm saying? Like a dude that does comedy in and
Right.
anywhere, you just know of that
But you're a
as
good
like,
pick. It's hard for you to understand that you're a good pick for them.
yeah, but like also it's just like this is crazy. Like I've gone up after like I had to go up after a Tal and Jeff Ross doing their bump and mic
Right.
show one time, and like it's just like all right, this is cool. But I one time I was there and they were taping the This Week at the Cellar, which is like a topical show on Comedy Central where they would just like the news of the week and then these are the comics topic. Now, for context, very rarely will a comedian go up on stage with something super raw that
Right.
happened that week and have it be polished enough for television.
Right. Especially
So
with all
that
the pressure performing at the cellar. You don't want to do anything
yes,
new.
yes, that was the other thing I was going to add after the fact. So just the initial ask of the thing is like a illogical operation.
Right.
Like you want me to have something polished for TV within the first like handful of times I do it on stage about something I may or may not give a fuck about. So I'm like, all right, I don't do great at it. I do, and because of I'm new at the cellar, I still got to crush. Like I still have to be regular at the cellar, so I have to do my job. I can't be up here dawdling. I can't be up here bombing. So I did my act and like worked a couple of things in. But like that week, there was like a mass shooting uh somewhere, and it was like one of the topics that was like, here's the news this week, and it was just literally researchers telling you here's the news for you to try to make funny versus like I think the initial impetus of it was like at the cellar at the table or on stage you may just talk about some random shit that just happened but it's like a magical
Yeah.
moment and to try to produce that is here's the prop that this person who's not funny farmed for you. Now you try to make it funny. So how do you make mass shootings funny when I don't give a fuck about like you know what I'm saying? So I didn't have anything that night. Now, over the course of the month I was in New York, I kept thinking about it and I have this run about people questioning my American-ness.
Yeah.
Because they'll always be like, where are you from? And I'm like,
Really.
Ohio. They're like, no, but like, where are your parents from? And it's like, you're just trying to disqualify my experiences. But so I'd already had that joke that I was working on. And then I had this mass shooting thing, right? And so kept talking and trying to figure it out. And I said that, you know, my dad's side of the family was Puerto Rican, was technically American.
Yeah.
but like, you know, we can't vote, but we're allowed to go to war. Every once in a while, we get some paper towels. And then my mom's side of the family is Mexican, but from the part of Mexico that's now America, which is a Native American. So I say that used to be the end of the joke, right? And then I had this mass shooting thing. So then, and I think that bit is on the unfinished form is on the Stick to Comedy album.
Okay.
And then and then I said to double down on it, I was born on an Air Force base, which is the most American place you could be born. The only more American place you could be born is at a Walmart during a mass shooting.
Yeah.
Now, it took me a whole month to get it.
Oof.
So that is how I would say, joke about pop culturally this thing in a way that like says more than that.
Yeah. Oh man, that's good.
And so my artistry is not quick,
Right.
but it's tethered to my experiences. So because mass shootings are a very American phenomenon.
Yeah.
Violence is human, but mass shootings are specifically an American experience. Everywhere else is just called war. And to quantify like my American-ness, which in this city of Lorraine, like Americans look like everybody to me.
Right.
So I would never question someone. I'm aware enough of all these cultural differences, even with the white people. Like, I know y'all got pierogies, you got all these different, you got Swedish, you got Ukrainian, you got all these little offshoots, French, Irish,
Dogs
Scottish.
and pierogies are from the different places.
Now, when I went to Scotland and people asked where I was from, I'd say America, they'd accept it.
Yeah. Okay. There's
and
no
I
scrutiny.
So like I'd never experienced that before. That having that level of like, oh yeah, cool, you're American. What's that like? How's it? I didn't realize it until then, and I was 33 before I realized I'd never been like never not had my American-ness question. And that's one of those things you always like.
You're so used to it.
I don't know. I think that's maybe like a mental fight or flight. Like I just like got this shit's just air. It don't affect me. And then I started to notice that made me start to notice the like cracks and shit. And at the same time, people over there process me as white. And I have a clip about that. I think that's on the Stick to Comedy album too. But that was also weird because white in the UK don't mean the same thing as white in America. And so like in my show, I'd already been kind of talking about this, like accounting for my social position and its impact on how I navigated like sex and relationships. That's what my show was about. That's what Unbecoming was about. But I also was just talking about like, like how like my social position is changing over here because y'all are processing me as white and I'm not that. So like my social position is the same to me, but it's different to y'all. So it may never match.
You got the opportunity at a certain point in your Jesus year to cosplay white privilege.
Yeah, and like in a weird way because I was hesitant because I was like, I can't get, and it's not even that drastic of a difference. But like the way I explain it now is like, because Dulce came out and we were sitting there. She was like, I could tell people from America before they come over and talk to us about how they size us up and look at us.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean? And I started to notice it because like people are handing you flyers and some people would just blah, 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 and then some people would be like, always American. The hesitant ones were always American. And the what it is have you been around anyone during this pandemic who coughed or sneezed and you're like, that look, that evaluation of like, you dangerous, that's again like air. It happens so often you don't even notice it. And so
just like how you'll hold in your cough so as not to get the look, you will hold in your
Mhm.
ethnicity so as
So
not.
how do you hold in your fucking self?
Yeah,
And that's why your sense of self changes generationally.
that's why we code.
What Rivas means to me ain't the same thing Rivas meant to my grandpa or his. But I don't know. That's abstract.
No. And I mean, that's a huge thing. It's like, what, yeah, sure. What does your name, what does your identity mean when you're with the generational trauma growing up? You're in an environment where not only frequently, but constantly you have to code switch for survival, for
Yeah.
adaptation, for achieving, thriving. But you have to code switch. You have to suppress certain parts of yourself because you don't want to have that ostracized look. You don't want to be stigmatized.
Or you're just so used. Like I had bought, I think when I got back, I bought this like real red Picot.
Yeah.
And I would never know. I normally wouldn't like wear it, but like I got like that experience in Scotland, knowing there was no one else on that island who was like me.
Yo.
And so I felt, even though, like I said, like I was comfortable, I knew, even though there's other Americans here, even though there's whatever, there's no one on this island who's like me. And I've always felt that when I'm in just around, like I culturally, I'm Hispanic, so I can access whiteness, I can access blackness, I can access Hispanics, but I don't speak Spanish, so I don't feel accepted there.
Right.
I'm not black, so I'm not fully accepted there. I'm not white, so I'm not fully accepted there. I get in this space where I'm like aware of it, but kind of like
Side character.
I felt so aware of it and like, oh, yeah, no big deal. That now when I wear that red coat, that's how I feel. I'm like, ain't no one else wearing this red coat. I remember one time I was waiting to go up to SNL and I'm sitting there in my red coat and I'm like, yeah, ain't no one.
And now your grandchildren, whenever they wear red, they'll feel some sort of confidence that they don't know where that
Maybe.
comes from.
But it's like, to be this fucking random from a random part of Ohio and, just like working class, like just like pretty much just trying to pay my bills and not die.
Right.
I've gotten to go to Scotland. I get to go to fucking hang out at SNL sometimes when I'm in New York. I fucking perform at the Cellar and get to eat snacks with my friends. Like that shit's
It's a charmed life, but it's a hard life, and it's
yeah.
But that's why it's
like
charmed.
it exists within paying my bills and not dying.
Right.
Now the other thing is like a perfect day for me is I eat good, I smoke good, I hang out with my friends, I hang out with my family, I do comedy, and then maybe a soft booty woman shows me affection.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't get a lot of perfect days, but like any combination of one or any of those things is like, oh, today I crushed today. This was cool.
Right.
And so when I was living in LA, I didn't have my family. I didn't have my friends, or the friends who I had there were busy. I couldn't do like all these things that were what made me feel valid or good were gone.
Damn.
So I had to change the context. Like what crushing a day was just like getting out of my head or getting out of my house when I lived in LA. So as long as I did either of those,
right. When the
good.
floor is ripped out under you, figure out your new floor, and then that is where you're at. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to ask a couple silly things before I want to talk about like one thing I did want to talk to you about before we.
Okay.
But a couple of silly things. I noticed that so the Cleveland Indians are no longer going to be the Indians, and they're thinking of another name. I was thinking it should be the Cleveland Negative Feedback Loops. What do you think?
I said they should just be called the Cleveland.
The Cleveland.
That's it. The Cleveland. Who y'all playing? We playing the Cleveland tonight.
They shouldn't be called the Washington football team?
Nah, it should just be called because like Cleveland has this irrational confidence in itself when I don't know if I don't think any of us know where it comes from.
Huh.
Uh but you know, for all intents and purposes, there's a whole t-shirt based economy centered around pro Cleveland shirts.
Really?
Yes. I have multiple people I know who eat off of shirts that are like, I love Cleveland. There's a sustainable economic bubble
Okay.
around that.
Okay. I did not know that, but now that makes me want to bring up this thing and I did want to ask you. Um, you've been creating a lot of merch and it's really dope and I've been seeing it, but it isn't just making the design and putting it up there. I've noticed that you've been shifting different incentives with merch, doing different marketing routines, and I think you're like opening up the lane for other creators to make their merch and helping them figure out their
Well,
own incentives.
Funches did that. Like Funches partnered with this they're called Below the Collar. It's this company out of
Oh.
Chicago, and they do pro wrestling shirts, they do concert shirts, and he got them to start giving comedians stores, like digital stores. And so he was the plug for like every comedian who's on that website is on that website because of Ron Funches.
Wow. Okay.
And so he put me on, and you know, it's on demand printing. So it's not, you're not getting the best margins,
Yeah.
but I don't have to spend $400 to get, you know, a certain amount of each
Right.
size physical shirts of a blue shirt to
Right.
go to have at a show for someone to be like, do you got that in red? Or oh, you should put that on a hoodie. I can just be like, hey, if you like you can go get any size you want at this website. They keep the printing cost, which is like $12 or $13, and then you can set the price at whatever you want. So when I was running those park shows, I upped it to $33, and I'm like, $10 goes to the shows that I'm doing, and then I keep $10. And just did the business on my end of like paying everyone for their sets and doing all this shit to honor that. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Because they just send it to me in one PayPal payment at the end of the month. They're like, here's your sales for the month. It's very simple. And it's accessible to where any comic can have it as long as they either hit these criteria or have the cosign from someone who's like Ron or within the infrastructure. So I definitely have slowed down how many shirts I've sold. Like I'm stuck at 24 shirts sold. And at 25, you can add unlimited designs and have unlimited color options. So I'm like right there. And then I bought like a run of physical shirts to just have, and like I've given most of those away, but I've sold a couple of shows with the outdoor
Right.
shows I was doing. And but I've made probably close to $1,000 off of that
Damn.
over the pandemic, which ain't much, but shit, that's some bills. That's like, for oh shit, I got
But
money.
you know how to
Cool.
stretch a dollar. So for you,
Yeah. And so there's been that. There's been like the occasional like Zoom shows here or there. And then in the beginning of the like before the pandemic happened, I was getting ready to do an album with a production label.
yeah.
And it was tied to a comedy club chain. And so in the I don't pay anything to get the album done. There's no upfront cost for me. The warm up was going to be a couple headline weekends at the different clubs, and then taping wherever at whatever club I wanted. And so most comics are like, "Oh, great," and they just say yes. So I'm like, "All right, cool." Like, I think I'd want to do these clubs as the warm up, and one of these clubs is the final. And then found out like, oh, the cost that it takes for the tech to go record comes out of the initial like it's whatever split after they recruit cost. It's a split from there. And so I'm like, oh, so I started doing the math, and I'm like, damn, I got paid like I'm not paying nothing up top, but like it's gonna cost like 700 some bucks to fly this dude to record it, and then however much it costs to record. I'm like, all right. So I'm deciding like, all right, I think I'm still gonna do it, but I think I'm just gonna do old material, like shit I've already done on my specials, shit I'm not really like the shit I did in Scotland and the shit I've been working on since ain't even in any of that. It
Right.
informs what I talk about, but it's not it.
You already have
And
that
so I'm
polish.
like, I already had it. So I was like, all right, cool. Like I'll do that. And then I'll still have my other thing that I've been working on for like touring. So like, all right, that'd be cool. And then the pandemic happened, so all that shit got canceled. So then I'm like, all right, well, I have like a bunch of clips where I did all the old material on my laptop. So I edited them with GarageBand, exported the audio, and then I used DistroKid, which is a website anyone can fucking sign up for. It's $20 a year. You can upload as many projects as you want for an artist. And I uploaded the revisited album and released it on 420. So pandemic happened mid-March. I was supposed to do that. Oh, you know what? Fuck it. Boom. So within a month, I produced and released this independent album. No press around to know anything.
The
And
hardest month
then,
of the pandemic too, when we're all wearing gloves and biohazards.
yeah. And so just to have something out that generates income. Streams may not be much, but it's like, fuck it, I got nothing now. So I put this project out, boom. The DistroKid puts it on all the Tidal, Pandora, um, Apple Music, Spotify, all that shit. Yeah. And then I submitted it to SiriusXM to maybe get played on there. And then I put out the Stick to Comedy album in August. Same thing. I was like, I got all this political material I don't really do, but like it speaks to like, you know, over this when all this fucking shit happened, like everyone's just like, fuck it, I'm not letting this shit ride no more. And just everyone just started speaking like, yeah, y'all make me uncomfortable when this shit happens, or y'all are being fucking like boom, 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 or like here's white supremacy, here's what it looks like when it's not crosses burning. Sometimes it's just the wind blowing, you know? And people would always be like, well, you should stick to comedy. I don't, you know, I don't felt like I had a girl who was like, hey, like I love you, but like this type of shit like stresses me out and gives me anxiety. So like I'm just a little small white girl. So like I talk to my family about it, but I can't do much else. And I'm gonna unfollow you just because it just to, you know, not personal, but just to and I'm like, that's cool. I hate the presumption that I don't also want to do that.
It's your shut up and dribble.
Yeah, or not even that. Like she didn't even say don't post it. She's like, just seeing it makes me feel bad, like makes me feel sad and anxious and depressed. So I just don't want to see it. So I'm disconnecting from you so that I don't feel this. And it's like that anxiety is something that just is in my brain all the time. That I've just had to just normalize. The fear of being a big brown man just in America. That's what most of the shit around all the fucking police violence is centered around that. Just being brown in America.
Yeah.
You're viewed with that. And if I'm holding fucking this and you got, you know, that's in there all the time, but I can't talk about it. I can't, you know.
Yeah.
But once it started being something that everyone was like, fuck it, we ain't letting this ride no more. It put it in a lot of people's faces who I fucking wish I was in a space I could turn that bitch off like that. Just disconnect from the thing that makes me feel that way.
I mean, that's the privilege.
It's not an isolated feeling for me.
Right.
It's not coming from one avenue.
Right. It's different from code switching, being able to switch off your emotional investment in something.
Yeah.
And
so I understand it as a survival mechanism. Like for her brain, that's her. I'm an alien in New York. That's her. Like I live in this bubble where I can be aware of it and make sure my kids don't have that in their heart and double check that my mom and everybody don't. But like, I can't do much else beyond that. And
I can eat, pray, and love.
Yeah. And so, but I get it. Like everyone has that shit within them. It's exhausting being fully aware of everything. But like, fuck it, what you gonna do? I forgot your question.
Oh, well, I mean, you kind of what I did want to talk about, and this was like kind of the main thing because I understand you might be able to shed some nuances on this. I was watching one of your bits. You talked about losing 100 pounds after high school, and I know you're like yo-yo dieter in terms of weight. I've had the same kind of thing. I lost 100 pounds in the last year of college, and then gained it back after law school, and then blah blah blah. And so there's always that internal, external perception, debate thing, insecurity, all of this, and I've always like okay, I have been able to, I don't want to say white supremacists, but talk to some people from like college or whatever in like Facebook comments that would come in on Facebook comments on different things and come in like real angry. And I would talk to them and I'd be able to like relate minority things or racial things with like, hey man, you know how you're fat and you don't always get the benefit of the doubt? Huh.
You were
You see what?
abstracting it like
Right.
that's what, like when I was doing all the shit about navigating sex and relationships, I abstracted my experiences navigating race as a person who's oppressed by this sense of whiteness to women being oppressed by I'm the white people. I'm part of the oppressive force.
Right.
Even though I'm not the one doing, but I exist in this system. So like abstracting it helped me like kind of get to where I could understand it easier, because I don't know what it's like to be a woman, but I know it's like to be a person of color oppressed by this type of system. And so to finding that that's kind of what I meant about not being able to have the conversation or having the language to talk to your grandparents about it, is like, how you gonna come at that dude without that fat thing? You know what I'm saying? Like you had to find the rational thing he understands so that he could comprehend this other very rational thing.
Right. You have to coddle white fragility in order to have the conversation that sometimes
even though it's a fragility, and it's also like it's calloused. Like I've been picking up I got a callus right here on my finger, but like that shit just hardens to where it's like you can't feel it flicking, you can't feel nothing pulling on it. It's an emotional callousness,
calcified,
that builds around it to where it's like you ain't even feeling it for a while. It really takes picking at it to get you to even be aware that it's there. But to answer your question about dysmorphia, I mean, I'd always been big. Like when I was a kindergartner, I was the size of a third grader. When I was in third grade, I was the size of when I was a third grader, I was the size of a middle schooler. When I was in fifth grade, I wore the same size clothes as my dad. For all of fifth grade, I was rocking the same size. I was wearing my dad's clothes. I was like, bop, bop, bop. And then I immediately got bigger.
Yeah.
Now, before that, I was not fat. I was just a big person. You know what I'm saying? My body was little. I didn't have a gut. I didn't have titties. I was just like bigger than my age group.
Right.
So I was on the top row at concert recitals, but I was also the person you would call fat within the context of this classroom.
Like Uncle Phil.
You are the unathletic fat person. You're fat. And so then when I just became fat, it's like a chicken or the egg. Was I going to be fat anyways? Or was I just so used to people calling me fat that I was just like, well, yeah, fat people eat 2 sandwiches at a time. And so then, like, I remember in high school, like, I used to drink 2 liters like they were 20 ounces.
Yeah.
And I would have, like, multiple, just like, doo. I'd sell candy out of a briefcase. Like, everyone knew me, but I didn't have any particular thing.
Also, the fat guy has the best candy, of course. It's a marketing gimmick.
Bro. And so, and then when I went to college, I like wound up dropping out, or transferring from the small liberal arts college I went to go to community college, and I just stopped going. And then I just lost like I went from 300 pounds to like 205.
Damn.
I didn't do shit. I didn't exercise. I didn't change my diet. Nothing. Everyone just thought I was sick. And I probably might have been sick. I don't have insurance. I ain't go to the doctor. So I was just like just this little like skinny, and I look at the pictures. Like my mom was like, "Who's that?" My sister's like, "That's Lil Ray." She's like, "No, it's not." And I looked at it, I'm like, "Oh damn, is that me?" Like I had never comprehended that I could be that small as an adult. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And so then I got big again. Like I spent the next few years around like 250. And then when I was living in LA, I was at about 260. I was riding my bike the first year and a half. I was riding my bike everywhere just because I financially like I was just, this is cheaper than Ubers. I can be anywhere I need to be on my bike for a
Yeah.
show within 45 minutes. So like let's go. And um
Even
I
though it's a poverty-based decision. In LA, you
yes.
can always frame it as an environmental-based decision.
No, ain't no one else riding their bike like that. Like I would show up disheveled at meetings and shit, just like sweaty. Um, and
It's okay.
I
He's
ballooned,
ethnic. They're like that.
and then I ballooned back up from 2018 when I went to Scotland. I was like 260, and then just slowly since then I've gotten back up to like at the beginning of October I was like 315. Just slowly, just being back in Ohio, I'm still broke, but I can afford to eat my feelings.
Yeah.
So I'm able to,
That's the
and so
emotional fight or flight.
exactly like, am I sad? Am I hungry? Am I horny? Or am I anxious? Either way, sandwich. You know what I'm saying? Like that's the solution to that problem. Especially in New York, you just go to a bodega.
That's why they call it
Um,
an everything bagel. Sorry.
and so in the pandemic, I gave a friend of mine advice, and he sent me $500 because he was like, "This changed a bunch of shit." So I'm like, "All right, cool." So I was like, "Hell yeah, new Xbox, dope. Let's go order it." And then I was like, "Man, let me buy this rowing machine." So I bought myself a Nordic Track rowing machine because it's one of those things that like I'm 100% confident I'm the brokest motherfucker who owns a rowing machine. It is something that like, well, you watch House of Cards, is rich motherfucker. It's something that I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of these people who like this is how I just exist. I like as a broke person, like a rowing machine don't make no sense to me.
No, but it's
I'm
like it's
never
like
gonna go.
buying it.
I'm never gonna go row. I'm not gonna be on no fucking yachting or
Right.
fucking whatever that shit team is. But like I've been doing this shit. I'm down to like 290 since October, and I just do it for like
Hell yeah.
sets of like 30, 40 minutes. And like I was smoking weed and like playing video games and like but like that shit just makes me feel like I'm doing something within this nothingness. Um as a that I guess that's my illusion now, or my thing is like because I'm doing this rower this much and like trying to like I've written a couple scripts and like whatever, I'm I'm not wasting away on the
Does it
marquee.
feel so? Do you feel right now like okay, we're in like 10 months, whatever, 10, 8, 9, whatever months in. Do you still feel like this is like nothingness and you're scrambling for semblance or
I mean, no, everything I do is to fight that illusion of that. You know what I'm
okay?
saying? But it is one of those things where like I I have the credits I mentioned, and
Yeah.
most of the clubs in Ohio are open. Ain't none of them hit me up. Ain't none of them respond to my emails. You know what I'm saying? So I was already struggling before the pandemic to get consideration to just like, hey, I've done these things. Can I headline a weekend? Either no response or like, oh, well, no, you can come feature. Like shit like that would be what I would run into. And so now, as these clubs are like shrinking their capacity down to where the excuse used to be like, we can't work you because you're not a draw. Well, now your capacity shrunk, so being a draw should not matter as much.
Mm-hmm.
But it now, for some reason, it matters the same.
Because
It matters the same amount.
there's the intangible value that clubs have for getting that exclusivity of having somebody that's higher profile, right?
And
It wouldn't be
so,
just the
yeah. And
popularity.
then the other thing is like that's the professional side of things. Is that like, oh, what? But also, as a human being, I'm like, I'm not in a rush to perform inside in a state that is like it's a purple state. So like most of the big cities are Democratic, but like there's a bunch of it voted for Trump in the election in 2016. Cleveland hosted the Republican National Convention and the Gay Games, which is the Olympics for LGBTQ athletes.
Right, and Peter Thiel was at both of them.
And they apply, and the same businesses welcome both of them, which is super hypocritical, but that's capitalism. But so that's the type of person who tends to go to the comedy clubs. So it's like, do I want to go entertain a bunch of people who are begrudgingly wearing a mask, or like, you know, or do I want to just stay at the crib and not be around that, expose myself for that? You know what I'm saying? So it's just weird. It's a real battle between like, I want to I've done the things to where there's no question that like being this close to any of these clubs, how are you not reaching out to me when you don't have to fly me out? You don't have to put me up.
Yeah. Like you're a household name in the LA comedy community, the New York comedy community.
But that shows you they'll bring a New York comedian out before they'll bring me out, even though me and that New York comedian are like that. Or like that.
Yeah.
It's an interesting dynamic, but it's one.
Or even if you have more credits than the New York comedian.
I just try to shut that off because it's like that's not where I want to build my value from.
Yeah.
Because I have value whether you fuck with me or not. I'm cool. I can feel some sort of way about it. I can be aware of it. One of the clubs, because I speak so much, I pick at the Callusses so much, they're like, it's easier to not fuck with me.
Yeah, you're difficult to work with.
Not even
loud minority.
Because I have had a club be like, I asked if I could open for John Caparulo, who's just a whole bunky. He's talented, but he's just a very safe, comfortable white headliner. He's not pushing no envelopes. He's not blowing the door. He's just like, he gets the job done. He's a professional. He's likable. He's all the things. And the club manager was like, can you not piss his crowd off for 10 minutes? And I was like, yeah. Now, I've worked that club for like over a decade. So I'm like, that's ridiculous. I perform at this club all the time. That's just such a crazy question to ask someone who I've been on TV before. Like, that's mad crazy. But that's all happening in my head out loud. I'm like, yeah. And so there's that. Where some club managers won't even say that. They'll just feel it and then not give me the week. He said it and I was like, all right, you can have the week. And I did this chunk about going to Scotland. I talked about race. I talked about all this shit. And I smashed. These white people love me. The club manager, the owner was like, I got a lot of compliments about you. Good job this weekend. Now, I'm the same. It's not like I'm not picking at the Callusses in that scenario. I've just the experience what did you say, confidence and experience.
Right. The Kruger-Dunning effect.
My experience is up here to where like I'm gonna talk about what I want to talk. Like there's comics who are like, oh, these people ain't gonna like this. I guess I'll avoid it. I'm gonna talk about what I want to talk about, and you either gonna like me or not like me, but you're gonna know me either way.
Right. Your high confidence in things is substantiated in a specific.
My esteem is so low. There's nothing you could do to sway my confidence.
Right, and your esteem is so low that when you do have confidence about something, I can be confident that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's like I don't got much, but I got these jokes. I got this ability to do whatever.
Yo, and it's like clubs are in the curating game and not the creating game. And now,
even then, a lot of the people in those curatorial spots didn't set out to be curators. They were like bartenders or servers
Yeah.
or door dudes who got elevated to those positions. So it's like your palette is really defined by your social group or what's around you. But that's predominant.
Yeah.
Then more and more there's people who like what
Leads
they
to so
want to
many
do.
cognitive biases and echo chambers in this.
Now there's more and more people who like, this is what I want to do. I'm aware of the ecosystem. I'm aware of the environment. I'm aware of the species. I'm aware of all these different types of comics. I'm aware of all this different shit. I can curate your club. I could book your comedy programming. I could do. There's more people do with that mindset than ever before, and they're slowly getting in positions of
Influence,
actual influence,
authority. Yeah. And then you see how they wield, a lot of people wield that influence and authority, and it always serves a personal pettiness of some sort.
Sometimes. I mean, I that's where, you know, because
not always, not always.
Because what you do winds up being so much of what you are, you get this proprietary sense of it.
Yeah.
Now, as a photographer, I'm sure you're taking a picture at this comedy show or this concert or whatever. You're doing your job, but you don't feel, oh, this isn't your concert.
Yeah.
These people aren't here for you. But as the person who's curating and producing, kind of you put all the shit I said about setting the chairs up, setting the vibe, and like booking they're doing all these intangible things.
The creator can do the curator game better. So
not
the curator,
even sometimes the people who can, if you can do both and understand those two things, it helps you. It's helped me as far as navigating the business, just because I know I've dealt with I dealt with contracts as a person who booked comics for bar shows and had agents and managers hitting me up to route their clients. I'd seen enough contracts and writers to know that when I did my Comedy Central special or my HBO thing, I could put shit on my writer. I could modify. I could ask for different shit. I could adjust shit. I could modify. I could amend the I knew all these things I could ask for without having a manager agent myself. I knew I could ask for a travel stipend instead of them buying my airfare.
The power
I could take.
Yeah. The power of practical technical information, and like thinking about how growing up you don't necessarily understand the value of things because you have to operate at a minimum value. So maybe your own creative services, things that come out of your mind, you don't necessarily understand how to value them in the corporate world. So getting that practical information from resources around you allows you to navigate.
That's what I meant to finish earlier. So the only difference between the first year of the festival where we made money and the second year where the club lost money and the comedy group that I had lost all the money that they had in the bank. The only difference was I was in Scotland. And so I came back and pre-sales were super low. And I'm like, oh, I just kind of trusted that these other comics in this comedy club would know how to politic and kiss babies and connect with the community and do all this shit. But that's what I'm good at. That's my val. So that the difference between year one and year two, that's how much I'm worth.
Damn. You literally got an objective value.
I learned that in that thing. Now it soured the club on just me. But it's one of those things where I'm like, all right, cool. And all the other members were stressed out. They're like, what are we going to do this year? We don't have any money. I'm like, I didn't have no money the first 5 years I did this festival. I would just pull it to get, I don't know how to explain it. But that's just one of those things I don't, my mental process, I don't worry about money. I'm not going to worry about something I don't have. That's a waste of energy. I'll just figure out how to get shit done without it, within my means and what I am able to accomplish.
Money's a tool.
And so it's interesting to navigate in this hyper comedy is a capitalistic artistic endeavor.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, commonly, most of the time, the comedian is especially like at a New York club with spot pay, the comedian is probably getting paid less than the servers after tips.
Oh yeah,
And the
100%.
bar, you know what I'm saying? Like, they're
Dude, I would get underpaid a lot for shooting shows, and I get paid more than the comics sometimes.
yeah, and because what you do is promotion.
Right.
It is it's a lot of different things that if you're building something, it is valuable for me to have this photography.
Something that I output for you can be used in perpetuity, yet my set, if I'm a comedian, and my set that I output for you can only be used in that room.
In this space.
Right.
Unless you use the clip of it and edit
Right.
it and put it on.
But then you're going to pay the video guy more than you pay the guy the comic.
Or once you do it yourself, like I did it myself, and between the two albums, like when I withdrew from my DistroKid earlier this month, I had to date made just under $700. And most of my streams are on Pandora, where I don't use Pandora at all. I just got put on a couple of playlists that I get like a lot. Like I have like almost 180,000 streams on Pandora from strangers. And then my Spotify year-end wrap for my thing, I only had 29 listeners, which means most of my streams, which were close to 90,000, were from me passively playing my albums in the background on mute on my laptop. So I've generated probably from just streaming myself.
Wow.
Probably like $20 to $30 a month, which over 7 months is probably like 200 some bucks from each. That's from Apple, from Spotify. And it's this real small percentage of a penny you get.
Your personal micro click farm.
And then my research told me that Tidal pays the most per stream, and I have 0 listens on Tidal to my album because no one will use it. So I subscribe to $10 a month to subscribe to Tidal. So subscribe to it, and I'm just streaming it in the background, and I'll be able to see like this $10 a month makes me X amount per month.
Right.
And I think it will wind up making me another $20 to $40 a month.
Yeah.
From just putting that. So it's like little shit like that where it's like, all right, I figure this out. And then I get these arbitrary stream numbers to be like, he's got over 250,000 streams on his albums, or he's
Oh, and it's gonna help with your booking when quarantine.
Digital, your digital footprint.
Yeah.
The amount of people who I'm like, who the fuck is this? And then I go look, and their bio says digital footprint, and it has all these like clips and shit. It's like, oh, all you do, you just add your views up across things and just say it's in the millions of views. Cool. I'll do that too.
It's like how New York Times bestsellers and books. Did you see this thing? Like I was reading about it. It's like to get a New York Times bestseller, it's just really about the amount of sales that take place in a certain shop, in a certain bookshop in New York on a given hour.
Yeah. And
that makes it a bestseller. And so many people game the system. That's why all the Republicans are buying Donald Trump Jr.'s book and all, they do all the shit in-house to push it up on people's algorithms. When you
it's all algorithms. Right?
Oh yeah, but you were trying to figure out the DIY way to do your own algorithms, passively streaming your own listens, while also actively giving people practical information for what they can do. Because if someone that's in the community is your friend or something, and they start doing whatever things that you're doing and they shine or whatever, that is not a threat to you.
No,
that is not
beautiful. Like I had a friend of mine did their album with that production company I was supposed to do it with, and they were able to do it in Cleveland. It was beautiful. And I'm like, dope. But looking at my shit, I'm like, oh, you're not going to make any money till the second year. And it's going to be half of what, because like the 700 I've made, for the production company, that would have come off the top to recoup their costs. So
Yeah.
I'm guessing their costs would have probably not inflated, but like, again,
It's like healthcare.
you're going to itemize the shit out of it.
Right.
And you're going to keep the bare share. You might not see any money from that album for 2 years almost. So while the immediacy of I want to do this, if you have the experience of production and these other things, you kind of start to question, and then you can kind of do the math, and then you can kind of figure out what's the best route for you. Do I want to just get it done?
How much of my potential profits is being eaten up because this production house has brand recognition and an intern who's aggressively researching and coding in keywords to each piece of content.
And it's like, who just said something? Like, I don't even think it's profits. I think of it as in perpetuity money. It may be a little bit of money, but it's mine forever. Versus when I did my Comedy Central special, that was one-time money. I don't get no more money. They could do whatever that's what the Chappelle shit is right now.
Right. Yeah.
Like, you're not giving me. They give you that nut up front, and then they're like, we keep everything after. Which is when you up top, you like, great, give me that extra couple grand. Here's my album. But you give up, if I make $700 a year for the rest of my life off of
Right. It's seller's remorse. I mean, like,
but it's also like, as a creative, I may have 25 more albums in me, or I may only put out one.
Right. It's like OJ trying to steal back his own memorabilia. It's like, get more trophies. But you can't.
So that's where I'm breaking through the survival mentality and like breaking the pattern of like working hard to be right where I am, is like trying to think in those terms of like, all right, this is my forever money. This is like submitting it to Sirius. That's something that the production company does automatically, and they're like, we have a relationship. I figured out how to do that myself, and if they ingested half my album, if they ever play a track, I get $33. They may play one track a year.
It's 33 bucks a year.
$33. So it's like
3 subscriptions to things.
Yeah. So it's like having the hustle that I got from my parents to like want that type of I want a little bit of money here, I want a little bit of money there, but having the experience to be like, oh, this is how I get it.
Right. Everything you do, because by nature of who you are and what you know, is built to be not only to be sustainable, but done in a streamlined way. Therefore, what you do is built to scale inherently.
But I don't know how to scale up.
Right. Because we don't know yet if it's a question of like motivation, if it's a question of ambition. Who knows?
I think it's a question of, I don't know. What I do put my hat on is I had this comedy fan. He like lives in Ohio, just a random dude. He came to the comedy festival one year with his wife, and he were sitting there talking, and he's like, man, we've gone to a couple festivals. Like we've gone to like Moon Tower in Austin, Just for Laughs, and Edinburgh. So, and they're like, these match those quality wise and surpass it intimacy wise. Because as we're having this conversation, like Doug Benson, a couple comics are like sitting over here chopping it up. There's a bunch of comics over here just like eating. Right. Like my dad made rice and pork shoulder. So it's like a vibe. But this dude literally just told me that my thing I barely scraped together, that generated 35,000 in sales, so it turned a little bit of profit because expenses was 20,000, I think, and we went over a little bit. So it cleared like 10 grand, which is like a bad comedy club weekend or like a mediocre one. You know what I'm saying? Because they're usually like clearer and bigger. And um, this dude told me that that shit that I did with that hustle matched these multi-million-dollar endeavors. Now, again, that comes out. I don't know how to quantify it. I don't know how to highlight this thing I know how to do to get that type of consideration. But that's what I'm working towards. But it's one of those things of like, you don't know, if I don't know how to bridge that gap or the translation, I hope to figure out how to understand it.
I think you and I are in similar positions in that, like, well, analogous positions in that trying to.
And I feel like
yeah.
that's most creatives, trying to adapt and figure out, and all of those things. And it's just like, I'm just happy to do. I get to hang out with my friends within what I do. Like, I meet dope ass people like you. I met you several years ago.
Yeah.
We chop it up every time. Like, you're just one of them motherfuckers I run into when I'm in New York.
Yeah,
you just became the part of the fabric of my experience when I go to that city. And that's how I met most people.
There's something to be said about that, because I feel like we talk about SEO, and I know we were talking about the marketing, like search engine optimization, but I feel like there's certain things that you do, and it might be being like a heavier set. That's like a part of how we related. It was like, oh, yo, I feel like you're kind of like not quite my analog, but you remind me of a lot of friends I have, and I relate to, and that. So it's like, I think of it like in real life search engine optimization, and it's like how you develop the texture and fabric of your experience in different places, and you meet and all. But I don't know. I don't know, that's what that kind of thing is wild to me, and I don't know how to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I just think of it as it's the gentle hustle, man. Like, all of us trying to do something outside of the comfort of expectation is why we all know each other.
Oh, the gentle hustle.
And yeah, that's all. Because, like,
please trademark that, by the way.
Yeah, I've called it that. That's because that's what it is. Like, I don't know how to I don't know how to tell you. Like, my dad works so hard. This motherfucker's worked at a steel plant. He works at Ford now. He's done contracting and shit. And it's like, you ain't never really gone on vacations. I think you have like maybe a little portfolio. You know what I'm saying? Like, he took money out of his retirement to buy the property next to us. So like, he does these like adult move things, but it's also like, I don't see you
ambitiously scaling. Right?
Yeah, the work doesn't scale. The work happens.
Right.
The hustle's gentle. It doesn't stop. But trying to scale it, trying to own the equity of it, because you're putting in all this energy and effort, but it's not going anywhere. It's just escaping. And so that's what a lot of when I ran shows, was giving it this umbrella, so that all this random shit I was doing in all these places, this umbrella caught all that momentum. But I'm bad at doing that for myself, because I don't like that type of ego.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I also think it's and I'm saying this, maybe I'm projecting, but like, it's also one of those self-defense mechanisms, is you undervalue yourself. You give a lot of yourself out there, and perhaps in seeking some sort of external validation, maybe yes or no, but also like, you protect yourself against rejection, because it's like the thing you were saying with like microaggressions against your mom, where she just didn't even it was just like, all right, no, I'm not even gonna approach this conversation. So it's like you protect yourself against rejection by giving more and more, and then you start to lose sight of being able to comprehend how to do for yourself.
Yeah.
But you can break down how to do for anybody else, like scientifically, the moves they need to make, like a boss. But like,
yeah. well, it's hard to like, to take it back to like what my shit in Edinburgh was about. It's like how do you navigate uh relationships with like emotional and financial poverty because they're so connected. And
Yo.
then how can I care if my needs and wants are low, how can yours and your shit's up here? It's not that I don't have it for you, it's just this gap. My maximum's not even hitting your minimum.
Yo. Shit. And
And
that
so
explains so many things.
it takes work and energy and effort to get me here so I can be there for you. But also, shit, we ain't trying to be there for everybody. My working thesis was we were all hoes till we ain't. Uh and
We're all
yeah,
hosts, so we're pimps.
now till we just ain't, till
We
you
ain't.
just find love and get out the game.
Oh damn.
But love is an abundance. It's your family, it's your friends, it's what you do. It's a part, there's a bunch of different iterations of it. It takes learning. Again, that circles back to like trying to talk to my grandpa about all this shit. He'd be like, the fuck are you talking about?
Oh my god. We never want the love we have.
Yeah. Or understand it.
Or
You know what I'm saying? But yeah.
or accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. Um okay, last thing I wanted to ask before we end, just because I the segment we do, it's called
Tokenized or fetishized.
and basically I don't know if you have one, if you have like a story or anecdote or something where you were either tokenized or fetishized, or maybe if there's no dichotomy there, maybe there's no difference there, maybe you can explain to us what the difference actually is or what they mean.
Um,
But like a story you might have.
I think the 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 first and most jarring experience of that is when I went to my freshman year of school. I went to a small liberal arts college,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Same.
my the minority enrollment was so small that before freshman of orientation, they had student of color orientation.
Oh, whoa.
And so you get to campus a few days early. There's some upperclassmen of color who you guys had, like we went to laser tag into the movies, and then they just kind of told us like what to expect on campus. Like it was weird. I was like, why do we? Okay.
Damn.
And then I was on campus already, so I just slept through regular freshman orientation because I was like, I don't want to go do that. And so I didn't settle in the main cluster of people. And then this is the people I'm introduced with. And then on campus, they were like, and here's a student of color lounge, where it's like just a space where y'all can feel like comfortable and safe, like hanging out. And I was like, shouldn't the whole campus feel like that? Like it was just such a weird thing to like, okay, so that made me hyper aware of my, oh, there's only a few of us here. And then the other thing is like a lot of people, like one dude down the hallway, his dad was like the CEO of Colgate. This girl down the hall, her dad was like one of the top ophthalmologists in the world. So just like, oh, y'all are just like a different type of person than I'm used to being. Like there were people who had never met a person of color. They'd only existed around white people until they came to this school where this literal smattering
Yeah.
their exposure to it. And that was jarring. So like I felt tokenized on both sides because like it's like, well, why are you hanging out with white people, or why don't you come hang out at the color lounge? And I'm like, oh well, I just vibe with the people who live on my floor, which was like a couple of the dudes who were in the of color orientation with me, who I still like talk to this day,
Right.
and then like the other random motherfuckers who lived on that floor. Like the bubble didn't expand beyond that. And I felt fetishized within that bubble
Right.
because, like, especially with like the fraternities, the way they tried to recruit us specifically was very uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I didn't do any of that shit because again it was one of those like, well, I'm not gonna pay to have friends. I'll just get if I get friends, cool. If not, I got video games. And then just made a bunch of friends through video games because a bunch of motherfuckers dropped out because all we did was play Halo. But like within that experience, within that year, like that's a lot of why I transferred out. I was like, I don't want to be this uncomfortable for 4 years.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay to feel like this for 4 years. So I just went to community college and then was just like, I don't know what I want. I'm just gonna drop off. And so like
character building though.
Huh?
But think about all the character building you did.
Yeah, you know, it's one of those things that like my parents weren't like, oh, I was like, my sister went to community college, but like we're kind of our generation was like, you guys are gonna go to college, like even though like not even for a purpose, just you going. And I think that speaks to that thing to be jaded against. Because it's like to right now, all the debt I have in my life is from trying to go to school. And it's like, well, I didn't want to go do that to begin with, but I felt like I had to go do that shit. Right. Generationally. Or the expectation of having to hit this acceptable standard so my parents feel validated by their efforts in raising me. And raising like that, I feel like that's something that ties all of us together in general. But it's weird to like have my dad be very proud of me while I live with him. But it's a paradox. It's a paradox, but it's happened. I'm 36. I live with my dad, and he is very, very proud of me.
Holy shit, you are a unicorn.
Yeah, man.
You're an enigma. That is your show, you're right. That's the pilot.
I'm trying to get a job. I'm trying to get a job on the show just so I can learn how to write first.
Yeah. No, you probably already know how to write. You probably can figure out all.
It's one of those things you're like you don't know
that you know.
There's no feedback. Like with stand up, I know I figured out how to do it because I could go fail at it and feel the feedback and adjust and adapt. There's no equivalent experience with writing. Like everyone could be like, oh yeah, send me your stuff. Whether they read it and send you notes or do anything is like the percentage is like
right. And you're saying this. I don't want people that are listening to this to think that
no, not at all. Like
because you
like,
did do.
I'm saying that's the thing that's hard. Like I think I know what I'm doing, but I have no way to tell.
Right. But I mean, you were experimenting. You're doing like you did the Bob's Burgers spec script that you got your friends who also happen to be very credited comedians and actors to do the table read for. And I don't know if you're able to hedge that to get you anything else or not. But like,
I just literally like the other day updated my website and put a page of writing samples and put the Bob's Burger script and the video to the table read because they recorded it and sent it to me. And then I have a second one that like I wrote the first round of shit they have you do is like write about yourself and like your experiences, but you're not a comic. So like, what would you be doing if you weren't a comic? I'm like, I don't think I could live with my dad and have him be proud of me if I wasn't a comic. Like it's hard to like extract those from each other. So I finally did iterations where I was like, okay, I guess maybe I could sell shirts. All right. But like did the thing to like, all right, maybe I'll try to. And then I just went back and like the other thing I wrote is like about my mom and dad when they had my sister when she was like a toddler, stole the pacifier in her mouth, and were pregnant with me. But outside of that, it's just two 21 year like when you're 21, do you want to have a family or do you want to have fun? You know what I'm saying? Like that's the duality. So I understand, like taking it all the way back to that helped me just be like, oh, these are just characters. These are just people. Like I know how my dad would act if he were 21. I don't
Yeah.
have to know whether this is true or not. This is just like how he might move. And so just like that helped me, like writing the Bob's Burgers thing helped me because I love the show, so I know the characters well enough to move them around within the world.
Yeah.
And then I had the weird idea that I knew how to, like, okay, I know these characters enough to move them around to get to this.
Yeah.
And that made me feel comfortable enough to write the thing about my family that, like, I don't know, I'm building these characters from scratch. They're my family, but they're not. I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like it's hard, and then I'm building this narrative, and it's like I don't know if any
Literally
of this is
creating your
proper.
own disposable extended metaphor.
And so it's like it's easier in Bob's Burgers because I know, but because like they're a broke ass family that like they just figure it out. You do the math on how many burgers they sell, you're like, them motherfuckers shouldn't be open, but they figured that bitch out. And so like that's why I picked that show, because it's like I could write that. Like my sister has 3 weird kids. Like I picked a thing that was like, oh, I could maybe see figments of my family in these things, move them. Okay, now back to these people based on my family.
Those Bob's Burgers characters are essentially just vehicles for these different messages and tones and whatever and observations you have that you want to push out, and you don't know, some Irish dude will watch that and be like, yo, this is exactly like my family, even though that family is very different because it's your family. And
yeah,
so
man,
it's like,
I get that a lot. I get a lot of people who are like, oh, you remind me of my friend, you remind me of my cousin, you remind me of my brother. Bro,
that's literally me. When the first time we talked, I was like, yo, dude, I know this is gonna sound weird, but like you remind me a lot of my friend, and it's weird. All right, I'll leave you alone now.
It's like a vibe, it's an energy. It's just like, yo, you just remind me of this chill, cuddly person I know in my life. But that's something to lean your hat on.
There's something there.
Yeah, man. But shit, man, thanks for having me.
Yeah, dude.
If you want to fuck with me, blazerramon.com, BLAZERRAMON.com. Has my podcast, has my albums, has videos and random shit I've done. You can check out my special on HBO Max, Intranos. You can see me on Cooking on High on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And if you could figure out where my Comedy Central special exists somewhere,
I couldn't.
Clips
are there though.
It was on YouTube for the month of October, and then they put it in the vault like it's a Disney special instead of just a comedy special.
Hey man, maybe it won't age though, like the Song of the South.
Yeah, man, but it's cool. I'll be excited when they pull it on in a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's on CBS's app. It's like who's young enough to watch CBS?
If you got your grandfather's cable information, find his user ID and login, download the CBS app.
It's like
log in to cable provider.
But it's out there. If you find it, you could BitTorrent it. I don't know. And then hopefully
it's true.
One day be touring in your city.
If you BitTorrent it, just make sure you follow at Blazer Ramon. Go to your website. And then bro, thank you for coming on. This is like literally when I made Return the Jewels, one of the first I was like, oh, well, I got to talk to Ramon. He's gonna have a lot to say. And we didn't even get into like a lot of the colonialism shit, but like obviously whenever you want to come on again, we'd love to have you on.
I mean, yeah,
because Ramon has a lot to say.
We kind of did talk about it because Puerto Rico's colonized by America. Yep. It's an occupied territory.
Yeah,
Mexico, the fucking South. Like we talked about it, but we didn't talk about it directly.
Exactly.
How I get shit done.
Which is kind of like how all these episodes are going. But yeah, I mean, yo, dude, come on anytime. Thank you. Obviously, we're gonna keep keeping in touch outside. So yeah, thanks.
you for watching. Check us out at returnthejewels.com or on social media at returnthejewels to watch more videos. You can subscribe right there, or you can watch a random video right here. Like, share, and subscribe. Tell all your friends.